Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at our grinders, or more specifically our pedestal grinder, our pedestal wire wheel, and our belt sander. We're in the metal shop here at Watertown High School, and we're going to talk about how to operate these and how to be safe around these items when you're in our lab. So in welding class, a lot of times you're going to have welding tabs that maybe you need to clean up, get an edge on, take a burr off, or grind a weld off. There's many reasons we might be coming to a grinder for those purposes. In our machine tool classes, we're not on grinders as much because we're typically dealing with precision numbers, so you're usually going to use a file unless you've made a major mistake. So grinders are going to come in pretty handy in our fabrication and welding courses. For all three of these items, safety glasses are a must, as you see me wearing here. We have sparks coming off, we have little pieces of stone or wire coming off, lots of things flying around in the air that we want to make sure that we are protecting our eyes when we're operating these pieces of equipment. For both of these machines here, we are only going to use them when they're at full RPM. So when we turn them on, we're going to let them rev up to full RPM, and then we'll go ahead and use either one. And then when we shut them off, we're not going to slow them down by sticking our metal in there to slow that down like a brake. We're going to let air slow down normally, however it would, because they're designed or engineered as discs for them to be running at those full RPMs. So it's a good habit not to stop them, which means it's probably a good habit to stay around in the area while they're slowing down, because if they're running slowly, even though, and somebody walks by, there might be a chance that they didn't know they're running and bump into them or something. So it is a good habit to stick around as well anytime this machine is running or slowing down. We do have a little water cup here. Sometimes if you're doing a whole bunch of grinding, your piece is going to get hot and you want to cool that down. So we have a nice water bucket there. This water bucket is removable, water cup, and you can just take it to the sink and fill it up if you need to, if you notice that that's a thing. One of the safety precautions that we have to be careful or watch for on especially the grinder, but the wire wheel too, is that our guards are close to the actual wheel itself. We got an upper guard here and a lower guard here, and they are both adjustable in, out, up, down, and at angles so that we can keep adjusting as we grind. That wheel is going to get smaller and smaller over time, so we constantly are moving this guard in closer to the wheel as it continues to get smaller. That guard needs to be a small gap, like an 1/8 inch or so, or essentially thinner, less of a gap than the thickness of your metal. And the purpose of that is you don't want your metal getting stuck or pulled into the grinder and jamming things up. So we always want to be able to have our metal up here and not get sucked into the grinder, so by keeping that gap small is good. All it takes to move them is a 9/16 wrench when the machine is off. We would loosen up whichever set of bolts here, and we can do adjustments on those guards to move them in. That is something your teacher will hopefully be taking a look at doing, and you can let them know if they didn't catch it, hey, move that guard in. But if you feel comfortable about that as well, you can work on that. So that's for both of these machines. When we're operating the grinder or wire wheel, we want to hold on to our material firmly when we're doing that. We don't want to be just loose and let it take it and fly it somewhere. We want to be firm when we're using that. We want to keep our fingers away from the wheel. I typically say keep away from the guard, because then you're away from the wheel if you're not touching the guard. If you're trying to grind small stuff, you're probably going to want to use like a vice grips or something that's going to hold that metal for you, so you're not getting in there real close with your fingers versus holding far away when you're using that. So holding on to it very firmly or getting like a vice grips to hold on to it when it's something small would be a good practice on that. And that can be the same for any of these three sets of tools. All right, let's go ahead and take a grind. We're just going to put a little corner around on this for right now for demonstration purposes on the grinder. So we're going to turn it on. We're going to wait for it to get up to full speed. And we're going to come in, I'm going to lay it on here, and I'm just going to kind of spin it, holding on to it on the grinder. I'm not going to press real hard into the grinder wheel. And so there we've put a little bit of a round on that compared to the corner. Just got rid of that sharp corner a little bit. Now we might still have a sharp edge here and here, So we can take that in here and just kind of clean that up a little bit. And then we've got that sharp edge taken care of from all directions. When we're done, we would shut off the grinder, wait for it to come to a complete stop. We're good to move. One of the things I want us to take attention to on the pedestal grinder is there's actually two different courses of grinding wheels on this machine. On the left side, we have a rough grinding disc, and on the right side, we have a fine grinding disc. Now, they're both still extremely rough. I mean, it's a grinding disc. They're meant to take metal off. But in regards to which one's going to take more metal off quicker, this left side over here is definitely a coarse grinding disc. So when it comes to a stop, and we're looking at it, you can usually tell that we got bigger stones on this grinding disc, whereas over here it's a much finer, smaller stone grinding wheel. So if we're just doing some cleanup work, some deburring, maybe you're going to work over on this side. If you really got to hog some material off or put a chamfer on your piece of metal for a weld, you might be using the coarse side over here. So it can make a difference as to how long you're sitting here at the grinder or how good of a job it looks when you're done. All right, so coming over to the wire wheel here, very similar setup. It's just instead of grinding discs, it's got a wire wheel sitting in here. This is typically only used for like deburring an edge or shining up something, I guess. But even shining up around here is not something we're usually trying to do for grade. So it would just be trying to deburr an edge typically on some metal. Now, compared to a grinding wheel, a wire wheel is going to grab that metal much harder. It's going to want to pull it in. So you definitely want to hold on to your metal with a stronger grip than you would on the grinder per se, because here it's going to want to, it's a lot of friction. It wants to pull it in. Now, we're not trying to take metal off with a wire wheel. We're just cleaning up edges. So on this particular setup, I'm just going to come in and clean up these two edges by running it in at 45 degrees on the wheel, both sides a couple of times, and we'll get rid of that burr. So I'm going to turn it on. I got either side, they're about the same. I'm going to hold it against the guard, and I'm going to come in here, holding it firmly, coming across those edges. And there, and you'll see it looks a little bit shiny compared to before. Kind of hard to see on the camera, but we basically got rid of any burr on this edge, so it's no longer sharp. You could do that to all the edges. We don't really require that on your welding coupons, but it is definitely something that if you choose to do on something or a finished product, you can bring it over here and do that to it, because it's always set up ready to go. We definitely always want to have safety glasses on with the wire wheel for sure. I mean, when you're running the grinder, you're going to feel those little stone pieces falling on your hand as they're coming off, whatever. It gets worn as that disc gets smaller. That'll be a thing. Might even be some sparks. But over here, those little pieces of wire are flying off. And those little pieces of wire are hitting your hand, your arm. Sometimes they hit your cheek. You know, you definitely don't want those little pieces of wire getting in your eye. You don't want a pebble there either from the grinder. But more commonly, I'm feeling these little wire pieces landing on my face than I am the pebbles. So we always want to have safety glasses at all times because we have that flying debris going on in this area. Again, same thing, if we need to adjust the guards on these machines, we can do that as the wheels get smaller with the same wrench and hardware as we're working on for those things. As we come over to the belt sander, we just got the upper portion of the belt sander here working for what we do. Turn it on down here on this switch. We just lift up and turn it off. You just push the switch down. The belt itself will track back and forth. If you notice that it's tracking too far one direction or the other, we can do fine adjustments on this knob right here, or your teacher can help you with that to keep it centered as close as we can on that disc. We've got the guard here, or the table that is sitting here, so we can rest our hand or rest the part on here. Again, this is not really for taking material off either. This is just for deburring. If maybe you don't feel comfortable using the wire wheel over here pedestal, you could come over here and use the belt sander. This also comes in really handy when we're doing TIG welding eventually, and you're trying to clean up your tungstens. This will give you a nice good sharpness on those compared to a grinder would. So turning that on, we're going to be a firm grip. I'm just going to clean up this long edge right here. And similar to when we deburred this edge over on the wire wheel, I just deburred this long edge right there, got rid of it. I held onto it firmly. Our gap is small here again on purpose, so our material can't go down in there for that. Now, one of the maintenance things we have to do sometimes on a grinder is you'll notice from time to time material might get stuck in the grinder, metal, or maybe we're wearing unevenly. There's a groove in the grinder type of thing. And we can clean that grinder back to a good surface. It's called a dressing wheel. On the back side of the grinder, when it's off, you can come back here and grab it. It's kept in the base of the pedestal grinder. So this dressing wheel is basically just some hardened rollers that you're going to push into the grinding disc and eat away at that surface. It's going to eat away pretty quick at it. So we don't want to do this like, all the time. But if you notice we need to clean up the dressing wheel, we definitely can. And then we're just going to rest this on the table like that and run it back and forth against the wheel. So we're going to turn it on at full speed. Set that down on the table, hold on to it firm, and put some light pressure into that wheel back and forth, back and forth. And depending on how bad it might have been, maybe you'll sit there for a little bit trying to get it down to a nice, true, straight surface. Or maybe it just took a couple of passes to clean it up. So maybe once a week type of a thing. This is something that's commonly done as we're trying to keep those grinders in good shape for what we're working on. Again, when we put this away, we don't want to step behind the grinder because you're getting close. Your hair, your head, your shirt, your arms are getting close to those moving parts when you're leaning down to put this away in the pedestal. So we want to make sure that is stopped moving before we're reaching down like that. Some other safety precautions just to keep an eye on. Make sure that you don't have any loose items. I guess I've got a loose cord here, probably is unsafe. Should have had it tucked into my shirt. But if you happen to be wearing a suit that day and you've got a tie on, you want to tuck the tie in. If you've got loose belts, if you've got a hoodie with those strings on it, tuck those strings in, whatever it might be. If you've got long hair, put it in a ponytail, guys and girls, it's safe to do. Or put the hair up, because when you're around these things, you don't want that wind pulling your hair in or pulling those strings in or whatever it might be into that rotating surface. We want to be safer on those things. Fingers are kept away from moving components when we're running this stuff, and you're holding on to your material firmly at the machine. If you notice that your material's heating up, you can dip it in the water cup so that your fingers aren't getting hot to the touch as you're using that material. So hopefully from this demonstration, we understand a little bit better how to run all three of these machines, how to turn them on, turn them off, how to watch for safety concerns. We talked about how to hold your metal. We talked about what to look for and how to clean things up. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask when you dig in. Otherwise, hopefully this video has assisted in operation and safety of our pedestal grinding area.